All right, guys, it's been a long time since I've made a video, and a lot of you have been asking for this video. So I thought I'd walk you through my thought process and how I work with color aware. So this triptych image is in your projects folder, but it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense when you look at it the first time. So I thought I would go over in version 7.2 how I would go about doing color aware. Now, color aware in 7.2 works basically the same way. 7.2 is just bug fixes, but there's one little functional piece of difference that is still a bug fix, but you can now see what's on the side of your print. It doesn't have that jagged triangle blending that wasn't really clear, so we'll have this here. So this is a very nice update for you to see what your prints will actually look like. Let me reset this view. Okay, so let's look at this image, and then let's look on the left and figure out what we did. So, or what we want to do. So color aware, let me go to color aware right now. Color aware is a system that splits the image into multiple color spaces. Now, I can tell you right now, I always work in 0.04, so I'm going to switch to 0.04 right away. But it splits into color spaces, and the color spaces are shown here. There's a blue color space, a red color space, and a green color space. Now, what does that mean? What's the blue color space? Well, as you might think, it's a color space for things that are basically blue. Well, what's the red color space? The red color space is much more inclusive. It's going to have your browns, your reds, your oranges, your yellows, and it may or may not have your magentas or purples depending on which side of the blue-red divide they fall on. And then green color space is just that. It's your greens. You might get some teals or turquoises in there depending again on which side of the blue-green divide they fall on. Now, how does it tell? Well, all it's doing, and it's very simple, is saying what color channel, of the red, green, and blue color channels, is the highest. Which one is the highest for this particular image? Or this particular pixel. So it looks at every single pixel in here and says, for this pixel, which one's the highest? And if you look at this pop-up, you see that red is the highest, FC. And if we come over here into the blue, we can see that, look, the blue is F9, that's the highest. If we go into the darker areas, you'll see that the other ones are much lower, and then the blue is 6.7. So again, it's the highest. So that's all it's doing. It's checking to see which one is the highest. Now, there's a couple of special cases. One, ties go to red almost always, just because red is the first one to be checked. So ties go to red, so that's why yellow is with red and not green. That's why magenta is generally with red and not green. Only when the blue is actually higher will magenta be with blue. And then grayscale, as long as we have set tolerance properly, grayscale will go to blue. But we have control over that in this version. Okay, so what do I mean? Well, when I switched to color where you may have noticed that the preview immediately changed colors, right? The green became very bright. Why is that? Well, that's because the green is up here at the top of our range, right? If I took green and I drop it over here and then I bring it up, you'll see that we don't see any, the green goes through each section, right? So here's the green in the blue section, here's the green in the red section, and then here's the green where we want it in the actual green section, okay? So literally the HueForge has been split up into three independent regions that are on top of each other. They're stacked on top of each other. So how do we populate this? Well, the easiest thing to do really is to go over to your color sets, your filament sets over here, and pick a filament set that's color aware. So the Bamboo Lab color aware. Now this doesn't mean the filament set itself understands the color, but it means that it's set up in general for color aware to make your life easier. Now, this load with defaults button is on. There's a lot of questions about what load with defaults means. What it means is when it loads, it's going to space the sliders evenly from minimum depth, 0.48, so this is one layer above minimum depth, all the way up to the very top. And they're all going to be evenly spaced. That means that it's not paying attention to where in the color space, where in this red, green, blue it goes. It's just putting them basically in the right place. So the first thing we want to do is make our whites line up with the tops of each section. So if we come over here, we can move this white up until it lines the top of this section. Then we take this white and we can move it up until it reaches the top of the white section there. We might want to move that black down one. Okay, so what that means now, we have our sections divided, and we have a red section, a blue section, and a green section. Now there's a couple things we still need to do. Generally speaking, in color pop, you push your tolerance up to claim all of the near grayscale that you want to call gray. In color aware, we want to go the other way. We want, if possible, to go all the way down to 0 tolerance. And that's because the way color aware deals with grayscale, it's not a range in here. Grayscale isn't a range. So there's two things I can do with grayscale. One, I can put grayscale within another range. Like I could stick grayscale in the blue or in the red or in the green. Or I can spread the grayscale all the way from bottom to top. If your tolerance is 0, it gets stuffed into a bin. And the default bin it gets shoved into, the range, is blue. And oftentimes that's a great place for it to be because blue is very perceptually low hanging fruit. We don't see very much blue. Human vision doesn't see blue very well. And as a result, there's a lot of room for blues and grays and things like that to coexist. And we have a lot of images with very, very weak blue in them. But we can move it. If necessary, we can move it into a different range. That's perfectly fine. Now you'll notice, let me bring it back up, this 8 that it was at. The 8's the default. It's kind of a good catch-all. Notice that the whites are here. They're showing green. And if I look at the luminance mode, and now in version 7.2, you can middle click. Maybe you could do this in 7.1. Middle click and see the luminance image, or you can come down here and change it to luminance, right? So we're going to look at the luminance image. You see that these are green, and that's because with the tolerance on, it's saying this is white, and that white should be all the way at the top because it's going to cover that whole range, right, rather than being in the blue bin. So I'm going to move the tolerance down to 0. That shifts all of those down, right? Now, these aren't in the blue bin, which tells me that these are probably actually pretty close to being, they're just slightly red. Yeah, F8, F8, F6, so that's slightly red. And this is why I have a tolerance, because this is very slightly red, but perceptually to us it's white. So in some cases, you might want to tell it that this is white and give yourself some tolerance. Certainly in ColourPop, you would want that to be treated as white and not as red. So in this case, though, it's actually probably good for us that these are effectively in the bins that they belong in. These whites look green, these whites look red, and these whites look blue. So that's actually pretty good for us. Okay. So now the question is, how do we get the colors we want? Well, we're pretty close to there already on the blue, right? Maybe we want a little bit more white. We could bring the blue down a little bit to make the white pop out a little bit. Notice the moon is red. Why is the moon red? Well, if you look here, the moon has a yellow tint to it pretty much all around. That yellow tint is pushing it into the red bin. Remember I said that red gets yellow and orange. So how do we deal with that? Well, we deal with this by giving red some yellow, right? We put some yellow into red. So let's grab a yellow and move it into the red bin. Now, okay, so we now have some yellow and red in this bin. And you'll notice that our little reindeer and hunter over here have also started changing colors because, again, they are in the red bin. They're browns, which are in the red bin. If we come here and tilt, you can see, first of all, now we can see that how the colors stack on top of each other. But we can also see how those are inset from here. And then over in the blue, we can see how this is raised relative to the blue because they're in different regions stacked on top of each other. We have blue on the bottom, the red in the middle, and the green on top. Now, one of the things you'll find out, though, in Color Aware, we can make this taller, but it's already pretty tall when you're looking at it close up. When we look at this close up, we already see that these shapes are kind of sticking out. So it's already a little bit tall, right? So we want to avoid making it too tall because then the features start, when you get close, they start to fall apart. Also, I kind of went over this without really talking about it, but you'll notice, I think, that I have black in here multiple times and I have white in here multiple times. And that's because, again, each one of these is their own HueForge, basically stacked on top of each other in independent ranges. Now, sometimes you can bleed across the range a little bit. Like me going into the red range here doesn't really break things, but oftentimes it does. So oftentimes going up into a range will change the way that range looks, not for the better. So generally speaking, you want to keep these right around these edges. These edges are pretty good. They're not 100% perfect. So if you are off by a layer and that's what looks right to you, it should be off by a layer. It's fine. Also, generally speaking, up until now, you should have smoothing off for Color Aware. But in the new version, smoothing works fine with Color Aware and won't cause you any problems. There was a bug in smoothing that was causing it to erode the mesh and make it shorter, and it was breaking your boundaries. These boundaries were never in the right place when you did smoothing. Now smoothing is fixed, and so you can use smoothing in here safely. So, okay, so again, color aware, we want to put the tolerance as close to 0 as we can. Sometimes you have to force the black and the red to be at the top and the black and the white to be at the top and the bottom. But most of the time we want it as close to 0 as we can go. Now here's a little issue here I want to show you. We have a couple of green dots here. All right, what's going on here? Well, these are probably showing up as being slightly green. They're either very white or slightly green in here. The green is just slightly higher there. You see it's FB, FB, so they're equal. And I bet you somewhere that it's a little bit higher, and so they're actually kind of green, but very bright green, so a white green. How do we solve this? Well, there's two ways we can solve this. They're basically the same idea. In here, you'll see these new controls. These new controls were added in 7.1 with no explanation. Here's how you use them. Each one of these is a global color shift. It's like putting a low transparency red, green, or blue over the whole image. So we can increment this up by 1, and you'll see that they just disappear right away. Because we just made everything 1 higher in red. And remember, red captures ties. Tie goes to red for yellow. So it'll take green right away. So just 1 change of red over the whole drawing makes that little spike go away. We can go negative as well. So we could have, instead of doing 1 positive red, we could go a negative green. That would have done the same thing. You see, I don't know if you noticed it disappeared as well. I bring that in. So positive green, it's there. 1 negative green, it's not there. Sometimes you do a combination of them. Sometimes you'll do both. So that's a new feature that is, not well understood. You can also turn off the color channels. These indicators are also controls. If I wanted to, I could turn off blue. Now you see all the blue went away, which means what happens? Well, anything that was blue is going to, the blue, it doesn't take away the space, the vertical space it's taking, but it turns off that color channel. So here, even though it says it's 4374 CE, that CE in terms of HueForge when it's calculating goes to 0. And so now it's a 4374, 74 being bigger than 43 hex. These are all hex values. So it's green now. So everything that was green in here, or blue in here, but had a higher green value is now green. And then everything else is now red. So that's how turning these channels off works. All right. You'll notice that my background is a dark blue, but it is not, and it is not black. And there's a reason for that. I avoided making it black because it was causing some issues with how the mesh was built. So I made it dark blue to force it down into the blue range, and that solved the problem. And I just color it black still. I just make sure that it still gets colored black. Okay, one other really important thing to keep in mind when dealing with color aware is, again, we don't want to make this too tall. And so in order to help keep it from making it too tall, we actually want to start using lower TD colors for some of our blending. This Bamboo Lab Basic Yellow is amazing on a normal HueForge, but we probably want something more like a Polyterra Savannah yellow for this to get our yellow faster. And then this red, we may very well want like a Polymaker Wine Red on top of our red. Sometimes we'll do two, I'll do 2 of the same color, low TD and then high TD, and that lets us get to our red nicely. See, if I take this away, we lose all blending and it's just bright red, right? But if I bring this red here and just stick this one above it, we get a nice saturated red, but we also get the blending into the red. So this is what I call double red or double color. I have a video on double white, my HueForge University double white, where you use a lower TD white on top of a high TD white. This is actually a really common technique I do all the time, and it's one that you should have in your arsenal. A low TD color on top of a high TD color. The high TD has to go on the bottom, because if it doesn't go on the bottom, you won't see it. The low TD version will dominate. The other thing that we might want to do here is actually a white. So I've been using, I don't have the Polymaker Cold White, but I do have the 3D Max Extreme White, which actually I don't think I have in this library. So I'm just going to simulate it. I have the Extreme White, and the Extreme White is like a nano-filled white. And it is, oh, actually, let's do it this way. Let's actually copy it. We're going to copy this filament. Let's copy of white. We'll make this the Extreme White. And then the Extreme White has a TD of 0.8. So now we have the Extreme White. We'll put that in here. Now, Why do we want the extreme white? Well, some of these transitions to color are hard, so we're going to bring this up. Some of these transitions to white are difficult to hit, so we're bringing it up here, right? Actually, that's below my white. Now we're going to bring this white down, and we have control now over where this transition occurs. It's still a little harsh, so we may want to adjust that a little bit, but that gives us some control over where that transition occurs. Okay, so obviously now you can make choices about your colors. You can choose how red you want this cape to be versus the brown cape here. You can change the greens, you can change the white. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things you could change. But I actually really like where we're at right here. You know, I wouldn't mind this bottom maybe being a little bit paler. But for the most part, I'm really happy with how this looks. So here we are. So we're at a color aware that's been built up. Now, this one is an obvious example, right? It's an obvious example because you can look at it and say, there's red, there's blue, there's green, and that's why I put it together this way. And you can see the version I have in the library. It's a little bit more subtle than this, has a little bit more color, a few more colors, or a few more colors reused. I think I reused the yellow. I think I put the yellow up in the green range as well, to give it that kind of yellow hue that it has in the image. You have lots of options like that. Don't feel constrained. But okay, let's talk about the red. One of the things about color aware is that you don't always have all of the colors, or you don't have all the colors that need the same amount of range, right? You have all of these in standard brightness compensation have equal amounts of the vertical space. We took a little bit of extra with the white here, but they all have equal amounts of the vertical space, basically. And that's probably not what we want, okay? So one of the issues here, right, reds often need more space. Now, this is not the ideal way to do it, but this is the way that works with HueForge as it's written right now. I am working on the beta, as you all know, for color match and other color updates. And one of those updates will be, but not at release time, the ability to set exactly how big these are just arbitrarily without having to do it this way. But we can come in here and we can do a mid-tone enhance, and I like mid-tone enhance 2 a little bit better. And just with the default power, you see that it shrinks the blue range, grows the red range, and shrinks the green range. Now, I think it's a little aggressive. I think I did too much here. This is more than I need. So let's dial it back. Let's dial it back to like 1.5. Yeah, that looks like a much better, more reasonable amount. So then we need to rearrange our sliders now to match up with these edges. So anytime you do a brightness compensation, you're going to need to adjust your sliders to match up with that new brightness compensation. So let's bring this white down. So now the white lines up. It's easiest to line our whites up, right? And then we bring the black down. Okay. And then we can bring this black up because it's down a little bit too far, and then bring the white up to match. Okay, so now we have way more room in our white range, but we have a lot less room in our green range and our blue range. And so maybe we're going to end up needing a lower TD white in general. Maybe we want to use the ivory white, or a matte white. Matte whites can be really good for this. So we can put a matte white here. It's going to get a little bit brighter. Put a matte white here. It'll get a little bit brighter. I always like to try to keep as few whites as I can. So in here, I'd rather have the matte white and the extreme white than have, you know, one of each, or then have a third white in here. But now we have some room to adjust exactly where we do our transitions here. We can bring our red up a little bit more. We can bring this one up a little bit more. Keep that cloak more brown. One trick in here is sometimes full range in these is not actually helpful. In fact, this is one of those cases where I think full range isn't helpful. I actually think this is a bug in full range, to be totally honest. I think there's something wrong with it. I've spent a lot of time looking at it, and I can't quite figure out what's going on. But see, now this moon looks a lot better. It actually has a lot more of the same of the look because we had more space to play with and get it to be, you know, we have more vertical room for the red. If we tilt our image now, you'll see that the red has this whole brown range, then a red, a yellow, and a white, and it's much taller than the green or the blue. But we didn't lose very much in the green or the blue. The green and the blue still look pretty good. We can tweak them a little bit by adjusting their heights of the different sliders. Maybe bring the black down a little bit. see, if we bring the black down here, the problem is it now starts blending with the blue, and that may not be what we want, though. It tends to, that's kind of a nice match up with our background, but that's not in real life what it's going to look like. But we could bring this blue down, or maybe we could use a brighter blue. Or honestly, it's not too bad the way it is. But if we wanted, we could put a lighter blue up a little higher. Maybe we can get a light blue in here. Maybe we'd do an ice blue. I think we have maybe there's ice blue here. There's a pastel ice, be about the same. You do this and then bring this blue down a little bit. But we have some choices here of what we want to do. But I just wanted to show you, this is how color aware works. It really sees a HueForge that's color aware as 3 distinct HueForges. The problem being where in the range things are. And you can shift them here, but that should tell you that you can also shift them in an image editor. So let me load up this image in an image editor. Okay, so I've loaded this image in an image editor, and I'm using Affinity Photo here. It's a really good tool, and it's not too expensive. I'm going to do a quick. This is going to be quick and dirty, but I just want to show you what I'm talking about. I can grab all of this stuff, and in fact, I can tell you that I did this with this image. This image was actually a problem earlier, and I had to come in here and do some of this. So let's just say that we were having trouble getting those clouds to be green, right? Again, I'm doing this fairly quick. This is a great smart selection tool that works really well. So let's just say that we're having trouble getting the clouds to select just the clouds, okay? So here, we've got a selection here. Oh, we got that in there. We don't want that in there. Maybe we do. Okay, so we've got this area selected. So what we want to do is we want to add a layer, and a little bit more up here. Okay, so we add this layer here, and then what we can do, let's just say that these clouds are too white, and so they're showing up in the blue layer, and we don't want them sunk in the blue layer. So what we can do is we can come over here to our flood fill tool, which flood fill tool, and we can change our color. That color picker came over here. Change our color to green. Make it green. Doesn't really matter exactly what green it is. We just want it to be almost all green and not other colors. You can see what color it is at the top there. So we'll just get rid of any red. Okay. And then we just flood fill this region. Now, oh, where'd it go? It's all, it's all bad, right? We can come in here and lower the opacity here. We can just make this like 10% more green or 15% more green. And then we can save it and go back into HueForge, and all of our clouds that were white before will now be green. And that will make it so they stay in the green layer where we want them to be. I could do the same thing here with this moon if I wanted the moon to be a cold white moon for this one and I didn't want it to be a separate. So I could come here again. There we go. Let's get rid of all this real quick. Okay, let's grab it now. There we go. That's selecting properly. All right, so another example is I've just selected this moon. And what I want to do, I'm actually going to grow this selection a little bit just to make sure that I have the whole thing and don't have a white border. So I'll grow it by 1.5 pixels. There, now I've gotten into the blue a little bit, that's okay. And then I'm going to add a new layer. Make sure you're back in the base layer when you're doing these selections, otherwise it doesn't work. Don't ask me how I know. And then we can take this and then just tint it blue. We have two options here. Actually, we could have tinted that selection. We could come in here and make that selection grayscale. But I kind of don't like what happened there when we did that grayscale. So actually it looks like with our picker maybe we can do this and get the yellows to be a little bit darker. Then our grayscale's okay. And then we can just come here now that we've done that, and we can dye it blue. What just happened? Oh, in here. Blue. And then we'll add another like 10%. 10% tends to be about right. And then when we save that moon, and let's just go ahead and do it. I'll save this off. Export it as a PNG. we go. And I'll just save it into my downloads. Okay. We'll load this into HueForge. So I'll bring up my HueForge, and I'm just going to drag and drop it in. You won't be able to see it coming, but I'll drag and drop it in. Now you'll see the shift. And there, now this part's greener, and the moon just became a cold winter moon, which actually kind of is cool. And now it's in the blue section. You see it's coherent with the blue section, right? So those are some options of ways you can control it. Now that you know that each channel is, or each color section is just defined by which channel is the highest value, you have control pretty easily with some very minor tools to how it's going to appear in HueForge when it's done. So hopefully this is a helpful demonstration of how color aware works and the general idea behind color aware. There are other avenues and parts about color aware that are just would make this video too long. Hopefully I'll get into those soon, especially the presets and the various other brightness compensations and how they can affect color aware. But hopefully this can get you started on how you want to think about and look at color aware.